Leaders representing the world's largest economies met over the last few days for the 2016 G20 Summit in Hangzhou. It was the first time China hosted the event. Major issues, of course, like economic recovery and growth were on the agenda. Topics like innovation and global economic governance were also part of the discussion. In a moment, I'll talk with a distinguished international panel of guests. But for more on the G20 Summit, we begin with this report from CCTV correspondent Wenjing.
Hi Nathan, the world's attention focused on Hangzhou again at the conclusion of this year's G20 Summit. This gathering of the world's major economies is crucial as the world economy faces risks and challenges, including sluggish growth. And at the summit's opening, Chinese President Xi Jinping urged G20 countries to avoid empty talks as they look for ways to boost the global economy. The two-day summit achieved 5 major results. I'd like to highlight 2 points. First is the creation of a blueprint for innovation-driven growth. Fiscal and monetary policies can help in the short term, but do not strengthen the health of an economy. The blueprint not only seeks a fresh impetus for global growth, but also lays down specific action plans through which to boost innovation, a new industrial revolution, and the digital economy. Second is setting up the first multilateral investment regulation framework. It is the first guiding principle of its kind in the area of trade and investment, and the move is aimed at improving global trade. And apart from that, an international tax policy research center will be established. An anti-corruption cooperation plan was also created to provide no sanctuary in G20 countries for people involved in corruption or tax evasion. This year's summit also made development a global policy issue and had a record number of developing countries in attendance. The summit reached 29 agreements to get the world economy back to an innovative, stable, and sustainable track. And outside the summit, some notable meetings also grabbed headlines, such as leaders from US, France, Germany discuss Ukraine, the BRICS informal meeting, Britain and Australia talk up a free trade deal, and Obama and Putin agreed to continue Syria talks, etc. Among which, China and America scored one clear diplomatic success. Just before the start of the G20 meeting in Hangzhou, the two countries announced that they would formally ratify the Paris deal. As the world's two biggest emitters of greenhouse gases, this is a move that's considered as a significant advance in the battle against global warming. In addition, both sides stated their intention to prepare and publish their respective strategies under the Paris Agreement. And next year, G20 Summit will move to Europe, and Germany will hold next year's presidency. Back to you.
Thanks again, Wenjing. And joining me from Beijing is Liu Youfa. He is former Vice President of the China Institute of International Studies. Also with us from Berlin is Volker Stanzel. He's a senior advisor at the European Council of Foreign Relations, and he's a former German ambassador to China. And joining us from Shanghai is Tang. He is chairman of the Brazil-China Chamber of Commerce. And with me here in the studio is Daniel Price. He has served as President Bush's representative of the G8 and G20 summits, and he's currently the managing director of Rock Creek Global Advisors. Welcome, all of you, to the show. Let's first of all start in Beijing with Liu Youfa. Before I get your reaction, let's hear from the Chinese President Xi Jinping as the G20 wrapped up.
In the last 2 days, leaders from G20 members, guest countries, and international organizations have engaged in in-depth discussions under the theme towards an innovative, invigorated, interconnected, and inclusive world economy. More specifically, strengthening policy coordination and breaking a new path for growth, more effective and efficient global economic and financial governance, robust international trade and investment, and inclusive and interconnected development.
So, Liu Youfa in Beijing, do you think that was achieved at the G20 summit, all those points hit?
I think at the opening speech, President Xi Jinping made it very clear about the 4 I's, that is innovation, invigoration, and interconnectivity and inclusiveness. At the closing ceremony and also at the press release meeting, President Xi Jinping proudly told the audience and the press circle that this summit in Hangzhou fully realized the pre-planned agendas. Namely, the Hangzhou Summit charted out a new roadmap for the future growth of the global economy. The leaders reached the consensus and agreed to coordinate policies to keep the global economy to stay in course. And second, the leaders also agreed to renovate the economic growth. And thirdly, the leaders agreed to promote the global governance in the areas of fiscal policies and monetary policies. And number four, the leaders also agreed to further promote the free trade investment, which would help to consolidate the foundation for the global economy. Last but not least, leaders agreed to promote the inclusive and interconnected development, which would help to balance out the economic development among the developed countries and the developing world. Back to you, Mr. King.
Thank you very much. I want to bring in Dan Price here in the studio, actually, because he's absolutely right. There was a coordinated effort to raise growth. We knew that at the beginning, both long-term, shared widely, but also coming out of the statements as the G20 wrapped up, a big opposition to protectionism as well. Do you think this can be achieved, considering the global environment we are? We have a general election here in the US, which is pretty protectionist in its rhetoric.
Well, one of the hallmarks of the G20 has historically been pushing back against protectionism. I certainly agree with you that that is now more important than ever. I don't think it's really going to affect the rhetoric of U.S. presidential electoral politics, which are aimed at a domestic audience. But a number of the building blocks put in place by the G20 and by this summit, particularly in the area of digital economy, can be very helpful. After all, the internet and e-commerce is one of the on-ramps to globalization, and one of the on-ramps that can spread the benefits of globalization, in particular to small and medium-sized enterprises.
Which is where the jobs of the future are going to come from, and it fits in very well with the innovation as well. Charles Tang in Shanghai. Obviously, the other word is inclusiveness. You have a Chinese and a Brazilian background. The BRICS very much in presence there, and developing countries. What do you think the developing world can take from the G20?
Well, I think that, born in the crisis, the financial crisis of 2009, the G20 plays a very important role to discuss how we can improve the world economy. And to that extent, the developing world has been benefiting very much from the Chinese investments worldwide. If you look at Africa, Africa was left by its former colonial masters as a lost continent for many decades until China invested very much and transformed it into a continent of hope. And the same way, Latin America and the Caribbean, America's backyard, is also benefiting from massive Chinese investments in trade. Brazil has a, surplus position and against China for many years. Its foreign reserves are over $350 billion. Chinese companies are making massive investments into Brazil despite the economic downturn from the political crisis that Brazil just went through.
Yeah, indeed. Volker Stanzel in Berlin, the baton has been passed to you guys now. Of course, Germany will be the next host of the G20. But before that, let's examine this one. In terms of Europe, the growth agenda, of course, is particularly important, considering a stagnant growth there. What coming out of the G20 summit gave you any hope?
Well, the fact that China and Germany already prepared how to hand over the baton and how to supervise whether anything is really implemented of the decisions that are
supposed to promote growth. We will have working groups which set up working agendas. And in the course of the next 12 months, these will be checked and controlled by representatives of both China and Germany to see whether anything is really happening of this extremely ambitious agenda. I mean, to add to what I think Daniel said at the outset, the G20 have always pushed back against protectionism, but with little success, one must say. So if now we try this approach to go through working plans, maybe that will lead to some success, hopefully.
Liu Youfa in Beijing, and that's a good point, isn't it? That obviously China very much center stage here, driving the agenda of the G20, but will it be implemented given the current global climate?
Well, I think one saying goes, we cannot expect the glacier to melt in 1 week. And all the economic problems that we face today were caused by many symptoms and the root causes. But the good thing is the G20 leaders have agreed to put the inclusive development at the front stage. And we have another saying goes, a good start is half done. We hope that the stage has been set. It's up for the Chinese leaders and the German leaders to coordinate and follow up with the concrete measures. And so I am hopefully that, much progress will be made on the areas that have been agreed at Hangzhou Summit.
There were a couple of concrete things, Daniel Price, coming out of this, especially the strong statement on refraining for competitive devaluations when it comes to currency, which of course is a hot button issue. Also addressed was overcapacity in some industries. Europeans and others have pointed the finger at China about their steel production. China says global growth will handle that, but has also said it will cut back on production. So it seems to me that these long-term problems may be actually reaching a solution in terms of consensus.
Well, certainly one of the key deliverables was the establishment of the global platform to address.
Explain that a little bit.
It's a global forum to address the issues of overcapacity. As you mentioned, Europe and the United States have for some time been concerned about excess capacity in steel and aluminum coming from China. The Chinese have offered a number of explanations for this and have suggested a number of solutions. But I think emerging from this summit is a set of measures that can actually help address the problem, not only transparency in terms of supply, but as you may have noted in the bilateral between President Xi Jinping and President Obama, there was the statement that says the market should play the decisive role in the allocation of credit. This will help with SOE reform, overcapacity, as well as the kind of chronic problem of non-performing loans.
And with the currency situation?
That has historically been an area of concern. Exchange rates, so-called currency manipulation. I think the reiteration of the pledge of parties not to engage in competitive devaluation and not to target particular exchange rates for competitive purposes is very welcome.
I just want to go back to Beijing quickly, out of order here. Liu Youfa, what do you think in terms of the cooperative language that's come out of some of these thorny issues going forward? Do you think that all the big global economies can now be singing the same song, if you like, because of the need for growth?
Well, I think at least from what I can see, this summit in Hangzhou has produced quite a lot of consensus. Some economies are at the developed stage, and others are just following up yet. But it is a good thing that the consensus has been reached, and this is a good start. And the second thing is the leaders have agreed to join hands in the areas of fiscal and monetary policy coordinations they've also agreed to readjust their economic structures. So these things, when put in place, should be helping the countries concerned to move their economies forward on a healthy path.
Well, we're going to have to take a short break there, but we're going to go back to Shanghai and Beijing in a minute. More on the 2016 G20 Summit when we return. Please stay with us. You're watching The Heat.